start recording right now. Good. Okay, so let's start. Well, hi to everyone. We are very glad to be here working with all of you. Today we will do a panel related to equality of women in rural and urban areas in Mexico and Spain. Our panelists are Ricardo Arriola, Jania Duran, me, Cesar Gastelú, Jania Gomez, and Victor Pliego. In the other hand, we have a group of the career of advertisement and marketing that is formed by Jane Bream, Livia Riedo, Luis Gonzalez, Matt Chapman, Mara Kunz, Ines Doyle, and Veronica Bale. So first of all, we want to give our index. So Hania, could you change to the next one? Okay. So first, we will talk about the context of our problem. After that, I'll give to all this pain group some time to talk about their perspective in their country, and after that, us like Mexicans will talk about the same. So first of all, I want to talk to you about the problem we will talk about. So as a consequence of a constantly search of power, resources, and most importantly, cultural alienation, over the last 5 centuries, it has been marked several inequalities among urban and rural areas around the world, specifically those related to indigenous people. These communities have seen like an impediment for economic development because of their differences in language, economic and production management, religion, and diversity, being victims of all kind of abuse, violence, racism, and structural attempts to eradicate them. Along this process, women have been the most affected group due to their role not only as breather of life, but as social articulation. This panel pretends to analyze differences between urban and rural areas women. Meanwhile, it is answered the question, how could we put an end to this discrimination and improve all women conditions in a globalized world? So, who wants to start in Spain?
I will do it. So right now, in the actual situation in Spain, in the 21st century, women, well, the traditional role of women in rural areas in Spain is a significant proportion of women living in working in the agriculture and are also unpaid. And right now, they're considered workers on the family farm. This wasn't such the case years ago. And in fact, the provision of the domestic and personal service by the household members to be used with the household. So women took care always of the cooking and all of the family matters inside of the house. And now you can tell that even in rural areas, they're changing their aspects, and now they're going into more labor work. We could change the diapositiva.
So basically, there's some problems now in the rural areas for women. First of all, there is the progressive aging of the rural population. Most women in charge of rural areas are over 55 years old. and only 6% are younger than 35 years old. So that's a really big problem. And also less than 9% of rural exploitations are run by women. So mostly men are in charge of the exploitations, and women don't have a very like important role. They're more like the helpers, or as Luis was saying, they usually help in the house and everything, and they're not taking charge of the really important stuff. And also over 80% of women that work in rural exploitations, they don't pay a social quote, and so they don't have social security, which doesn't give them access to, for example, public health care. And also they don't have working rights.
All of this also influences the well-being of the women in the rural areas. For example, mentally, women living in underprivileged rural areas are more likely to suffer from mental disorders like depression or anxiety. This is because they always feel lonely because they don't have leisure activities like gyms or cinemas, for example, and also they often have a low self-esteem. And because they have the feeling that they are less capable than the women in the urban areas, and also they have the personal dilemma because they have the desires but to have higher goals, but they live in the countryside, so they cannot pursue their goals. And also physical, there are differences in the health-related lifestyle and medical care, for example. For the lifestyle, there are less frequent daily vegetable intake, and they are less likely to be active in their day-to-day life. And also they have a lower frequency of visits to public health care due to bad public transportation, for example. And they are less likely to get preventive health examinations, for example, by the gynecology, I don't know the word. And as a result, women residing in the rural areas are more vulnerable to be diagnosed with breast cancer and at later stages, for example.
So because of those problems that were already mentioned and other problems, there's currently a big trend of young women to move from rural areas where they were born to more urban areas and big cities. And yeah, as I said, that's because of what was already mentioned, and also there's just not enough job opportunities except for in the hospitality and livestock sector, and that's more dominated by men. And especially if the women want to study, it's pretty hard to do that in a rural area, so they usually move away. And yeah, this trend is referred to as rural masculinization, and it's probably gonna carry on to an extent where there's barely any women left in the rural areas, especially younger women. And what they also say, or in the article that I read, was what happened now? Well, one of the quotes that I read there was either you die of boredom or you move away or something like that. I can't read it right now because the slide is gone. But yeah, they are basically really bored. They don't really know what to work. And that's where they move away.
So what kind of women migrated to the urban areas? Female rural to urban migration is also blamed on rural family tradition. Well, boys have been typical trained to take care of livestock or crops, and with a view to inheriting farmland for the future. That have been given and girls that have been given education found it inapplicable to rural life. So to the girls, they said like they encouraged them to move to the cities to find a job. And in the mid-center in Castillo and Leon, the majority of female immigration and had a relative low levels of education, and they were looking and they were looking for domestic position. By the wait. Sorry. By the 1917, those who left the city tended to be women with more years of schooling, with aspiration or socially mobility, and in the hope of pursuing a career. This migrant phase considered with the rise of the tertiary service sectors with the national economy. And in the northern Navarre, not many women migrated to Pamplona in the immediate post-war decades. The general area was still mainly agricultural. So the women who did make the step to go to the city from the 1970s tended to be those from the next generation. They were better educated, more aware of the social cultural changes, and able to apply for salary jobs. So they like first they were low education, and after that, so in the 1917, they were becoming more highly educated. You can go to the next one.
Okay, so the Mexican team, could you start?
The new or current role of women in rural areas in Spain. A new study published by the Spanish Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food reinforces the commitment given to support women in rural areas. They came to the conclusion that there have been several changes in the life of rural women in Spain over the last decade. There have been three major improvements. First, the women are greater incorporated into their workplace. Second, the study has also shown a greater openness of the younger rural population in relation to gender roles and stereotypes. Third, a significantly reduced gap between women and men in relation to the time dedicated to leisure and free time was found. Nevertheless, some other aspects, such as the demographic imbalances as aging, masculinization of rural areas, and lower birth rates have greatly worsened over the past decade. In addition, the burden of home care and other care responsibilities have fallen even more on women. These recent findings lead to the conclusion that there is still more to do to advance the progress of gender equality in rural areas in Spain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's your turn.
Yes. Well, now we are going to talk about the current situation of women in urban areas in Mexico. The role of women in urban areas in Mexico, in the country, women with higher qualifications still have access to the high-ranking positions with salaries that are 50% lower than those of men, based on the network of women of municipalities for gender equality. The president of this institution say that one of the most worrying issues is the low economic participation of women in Mexico, despite the fact that their schooling has multiplied.
Bueno, abordando un poco sobre la actual situación en México, un poco más caracterizado en la parte urbana, pues tenemos el comportamiento de la sociedad respecto a cómo se ve dividida y situada al final de cuentas. En 2017 se hizo una encuesta nacional de vivienda, que es la que se hace en cada cierto tiempo, el cual nos dijo que el 61.5 millones de mujeres que existen en todo México, al menos en 2017, 23% de ellos habitaban en localidades rurales. Esto significa que había una gran amplitud y todavía pues hay todo un margen discriminatorio que existe. Entre eso, el 59,3% de las mujeres encuestadas consideran que en el país había discriminación por el hecho de ser mujer. Y en el 2016, por parte de la encuesta nacional sobre la dinámica de las relaciones en los hogares, Enri refieren que en México 66,1% de las mujeres han sufrido violencia. Pero esto no se queda acá. Realmente, a pesar de todas las situaciones y los problemas que existen tanto familiarmente y violencia intrafamiliar, en México se ha optado por avanzar en estas características y apoyar a las mujeres recientemente y en distintos programas, dándole un mayor refuerzo. Un caso fácil de identificar es que hay muchas mujeres que ahorita han tomado cargos políticos y entre ellas el 26 mujeres de indígenas tomaron cargos políticos de las 36 que se habían postulado, entonces es por ahí un 66%. Asimismo, pues existen obviamente programas que apoyan a las mujeres para lo que serían las viviendas y las acciones en donde están. También está InMujeres, que es un programa que ayuda, escucha y genera lo que serían mejores estilos para las mujeres. Un problema acá también que existe es que, por ejemplo, al menos en las zonas rurales, las mujeres al no tener directamente el control o más bien que no son dueñas del lugar donde siembran y al final de cuentas ellas son una de las principales figuras en esta parte, no se les puede atribuir ciertos apoyos debido a esta característica porque al final de cuentas no es un terreno propio. Entonces se opta por otros estilos de programas para apoyar a las mujeres y pues se ha estado buscando aprovechar y enfocar esos puntos débiles para que las mujeres tengan más opciones en que se puedan apoyar.
Bueno, pues algunos problemas que sufren las mujeres en zonas rurales de México es que la mayoría de mujeres y niñas enfrentan obstáculos para ejercer sus derechos, ya que 6 de cada 10 viven en pobreza y desigualdad. Las mujeres que habitan en estas zonas rurales eh, es la población que tiene más producción de alimentos en México, pero a pesar de que las zonas rurales son las mayores agricultoras que producen la mitad de los alimentos en nuestro país, es sabido que más del 3,6 millones de hombres tienen o poseen núcleos agrarios en todo el país, pero solo ni siquiera 3 de 4 hombres tienen derechos sobre la misma, ya que al no ser propietarias de la tierra, las mujeres no reciben apoyos de programas para equipamiento de infraestructura o créditos económicos para servicios ambientales. Respecto al acceso de salud, pues solo el 13% de mujeres rurales tenían cobertura de salud, ya que 2 de cada 3 mujeres maternas carecieron de atención médica en su etapa de maternidad.
En las últimas décadas, la economía de los campesinos se ha deteriorado. Esto ha hecho que las mujeres busquen formas de ingresos para sus familias, generando así el concepto de feminización del campo mexicano. Esto se refiere a que las mujeres han agarrado la mayor parte del trabajo de los campos agrícolas, siendo así que el 80% del territorio es ocupado y manejado por las mujeres, siendo ellas el pilar de sus familias. También se ha registrado que las mujeres trabajan 89 horas semanales, 31 horas más que los hombres.
Okay, so I think that's all for the presentations. So because the other slide, I think there's no, well, here's not the guy that was about to talk about it. So could you stop sharing your the presentation, Hannah, please? Okay, so let's start with the brief session of questions, and that's all for our panel. So, Mara, you talked about a trend related to women living like the rural areas and going to the cities. So, what are the main reasons uh, why these women are doing this?
So yeah, what I talked about was mainly about the young woman, and yeah, the main reasons are just that they want to study, they want to be able to do jobs that they actually like, and the possibilities are very low in the rural areas. And then of those possibilities that are there, it's usually man-dominated jobs. So that's where they usually go. And also, in the article it also said that when they see that all their friends are moving to the city, they are even like, yeah, more into moving to the city because they see that everybody's doing, and that's how the trend is getting even bigger.
Okay, and do we know how the government is dealing with this situation?
No, I think, well, I didn't read about it in the article, so I'm not sure if there is any way of dealing with it. Another reason I just remembered was also that the transportation system is pretty difficult in the rural areas, so it's also not easy for them to go to the city just to study without moving there. So that's why they then move there. I think that's something that the government could do, for example, about the situation, but I didn't read anything about whether they are planning to do something.
Yes, because I could imagine a problem and a deficiency in the agricultural system there in Spain because of all the women are going to work in urban areas to do, I don't know if it's the word, but common works. So it's kind of hard because someone has to do the job related to the agricultural stuff.
Well, I guess the men were currently doing it then, or are gonna do it more and more.
Okay, good. So Richie, could you talk more about the situation of indigenous women here in Mexico, how they were violented among these years?
Pues en la actualidad, la mayoría de las mujeres tienen menos derechos que los hombres en estas zonas rurales. Normalmente, como bien expliqué, poseen menos posesiones, por decirlo así, como en el caso de las tierras, que como bien explicaba, son las mayores productoras en este ámbito rural, pero con el paso de los años han tratado, o al menos la política ha tratado de que esto cambie en ese aspecto en cuanto a los derechos, porque se ha tratado de impulsar, pero no ha sido de mucho éxito, puesto que pues siguen habiendo desigualdades al menos en el ámbito rural, en el que pues sigue habiendo más derechos para los hombres que para las mujeres. Y en el aspecto de salud, pues está mucho peor.
Okay, good. Does anyone wants to propose something related to this problem? How could we solve it?
I mean, right now in Spain, it's not nothing new, but they're injecting the government more money into these programs for equality and so much. So yeah, that's a way to level it out, make it work.
Okay, good. And how the pandemic has an impact in these policies, in these programs? Did it affect in some way?
Affected overall jobs because the country was paralyzed during many months. There's no work, and rural areas, the men kept on working on the fields because it was necessary, and I believe that maybe women also tried to find jobs that they could pursue and do. So there was it was affected. There's millions of euros were affected. Yes.
Okay, good. So anyone else wants to add something to this conversation? No? Cool. So I guess that's all. And we don't have anything else to do. And thank you for your time. I mean, for us in Mexico, it's kind of hard because